Hey, it's Brian. Welcome to The Other 51. So this is a special bonus episode that we're dropping this week. If we had Patreon, this is what we'd probably do as a bonus episode. But anyway, joined by my wife and senior editor and inclusive language specialist at DS & Co. in Rochester, Jen Moritz. Hey, buddy.
Hi.
Okay, so regular episode is with Jen, and it's going to drop next week as usual. We're going to talk all about inclusive language and what it means and all of this. But we were ranting to each other. Well, actually, Jen was ranting to me as we were reading the new Associated Press guidelines and style book updates that came out over the weekend. And we realized, A, we were basically doing maintenance phase, so we have to do it. But B, we needed to record this and get it out there. So that's what this is. So I hope you enjoy it. And again, regular episode is coming out next week. So just to set the table, the AP style book, if you're familiar with journalism, it's the style book. It's the grammar rules and usage and stuff that journalists follow. And a bunch of updates were announced this past weekend at the ACES Society for Editing Conference, which you've been to, right?
I have been. It's awesome.
It's awesome. Okay, so there are a bunch of prefix and suffix rules that I guess we could talk about, but they're not really. I mean, they're not interesting, not for our purposes here. So as you're scrolling down, they have new entries and changes. So they have new suffixes, new prefixes, how to refer to Twitter. And then there's one that's titled obese, obesity, overweight. New. So a new section. So first reactions when you saw that this was an update.
I have been groaning a lot for the past 5 minutes, and I'm really sad that we didn't jump on this as a live read while I was looking through it for the first time, because I'm afraid we missed all the really good stuff.
We did. But it's okay. So what we're going to do here is we're going to talk about this section of the updates and talk about why. I'm just going to let you go on it. So this starts off obese, obesity, overweight. How do you want to do this? Do you want to read? Do you want to just overarching?
I don't know, but I think it's important to say that first we went through the top of this and through this very, very long prefix and suffix section where they give all these new rules and then kind of contradict themselves, and I was getting slowly worked up as we were going down this email.
Yes.
So by the time we got to obese, obesity, overweight, I was really primed to get on here and want to rant. And I don't think I've ever been so quick to be like, yes, let's hop on and record something. I can't get past the first 3 words of this entire entry, which are people with obesity. And I know that is a term. I'm fine with it being a term. I think it's great. But right out of the gate, I feel like we are trying a little hard here to prove how much we care about this subject. Okay. But I want to pause and say, I care deeply about this subject. This is why I'm so upset. I am not upset because it's included. I am not upset because they're trying. I love that they're trying. I'm upset because I can't get past the very first sentence without being frustrated and feeling like best intentions may not have come out as best entries.
Yes. So just before we keep going, a couple quick things. First of all, yes, I think it's great that this is included in a style book and language and getting people to think about how they talk about and read about this stuff. And of course, as always, when we talk about this, a huge shout out to Aubrey Gordon and her work and maintenance phase and their work there. It really is kind of got this top of mind, I think, for us in a lot of ways and got us thinking about this.
It has absolutely changed. I know it sounds very dramatic to say it has absolutely changed my life, but the work they are doing specifically has absolutely changed my life. But more important, it has completely changed the way I talk about weight and I think about weight and I talk about people. And I don't just mean people who are, I don't even want to say larger because I don't think that's an accurate way to talk about it, right? Larger than, let's say, the national average. And that includes me. So I'm finding new ways to talk about myself and other people, and I'm also finding ways to talk about people who are very thin or any size, right? And
okay. So all right, back to the style update.
Okay.
So I'll let you read, and do you want me to read and you go off, or
I don't. I don't know. I honestly don't know. But I will say, okay, so they start with the phrase people with obesity, which is fine, right? I think that's fine. I think it's great that they're trying. I'm also just genuinely curious how many people who medically are considered obese would call themselves a person with obesity. I'm curious. I don't have an answer. I'm curious. If somebody called me a person with obesity, I'd be like, no, you are welcome to never talk about me again. So, they do mention in here, and I think it's great. They say people who talk about themselves have specific words that they use to talk about themselves. And I think that's critically important here. And when in the episode that we recorded before, I talk about how somebody once asked me how to talk about weight and body sizes. And I said, if you have somebody who you respect, who you think is talking about it well, borrow their words for now. But this is an important reminder that their words may not be your words, and they may not be the next person's words. So you really do have to pay attention and listen. But this is a good point, a good place to dive into where I started groaning out loud. Yes. It says, use care and precision, considering the impact of specific words and the terms used by the people you are writing about. Good, thumbs up. But then it goes on to say, when possible, ask people how they want to be described.
So, yes. So, as a general idea, when you're writing about people, I can get behind this as a general concept, right? I ask you, how do you want to be described? Whether it's gender identity, sexual orientation, right? Like, I think that is, in theory, a decent concept, right? Because then, rather than me imposing what I think your identity is, you get to kind of control your identity, especially in something like a news story that's being published publicly.
But I want to poke some big holes in that. And what we sort of talked about quickly before we jumped on here was, I used the example of a reporter writing a story about the size of seats on airplanes, or maybe that they are planning to charge people for extra seats, or they are removing people from planes because of the size of their body. And that's a hot topic. If you're writing a story about that topic, then you need to stay true to the topic you're writing about. And you need to do your own homework about how you talk about that topic. But if you are talking to a random person in an airport who you have decided just by looking at them is a size that may be having a problem with seats on an airplane, well, one, you have immediately made an assumption about that person. And two, are you going to go up to them and talk to them about the size of their seat on the airplane and then ask them how they want to be described? And what is the average person going to say to you? If you come up to me and you start talking to me about how comfortable I just was on my flight, and then you follow it up with, how do you want to be described? I'm going to tell you I'm from New York. I'm a woman. I use, she, her pronouns. I like to travel. Like, I'm going to tell you those things. Nowhere in my head am I going to give you a definition for how, or the words of how I want you to describe my body. Right. And you have no right to be talking about my body, right? And when we were talking about it, I said, I can't remember the exact phrasing I used, but I think I said, you may be writing a story about people who are not comfortable in those seats, or maybe who don't fit in those seats, but you don't need to describe their body to have that conversation and to convey the story you're telling or the news you are writing. So guidance that you should be asking people how they want you to describe their body or their weight is the first place I sort of fell over while reading this. And there are going to be times when you have to ask, right? If they're writing or reporting on something that is very specific to a person's body, and that person knows that is why they're being interviewed, there are exceptions to that. But as a general rule, why do you need to describe someone's body if they fit in the context of what you're writing about?
Well, and you had kind of like raised the question as we were talking, like, as the hypothetical, like, how do you ask that question? And I was thinking about it as a reporter, and I was on the spot. I'm like, I don't know. Like, there's no way to ask that without.
There's not. No.
There's no way. There's no way.
I've told this story before, and it is one of the many reasons why I am not a reporter anymore. When I was a very, very green reporter, I had to interview. I interviewed somebody, a student in a wheelchair. And the story was about how they had overcome things, right, to graduate at the top of their class, or whatever the story was. I actually don't remember. But at the time, I couldn't figure out how to ask why. Like, yeah. What was their story, right? And even now I'm struggling to say here, without causing any harm to anybody, how I ask the question, because this was a student and it was a young person who is not necessarily able, because they are young, to understand what I'm asking without me saying the words. And to this day, I don't know. I don't know why that student was in a wheelchair. I don't know what their personal obstacles were, because I just was not capable of asking that question. And I'm in my 40s and I still don't know how I would ask that question, and I'm struggling to talk about it right now. So how do you can't tell people. That can't be the guidance here.
Right. And I mean, because like, what's the story you're telling? The story you're, like you said, how this young person got in a wheelchair, and we're getting a field, so we'll keep this tight. It doesn't matter to the story, right? And it doesn't make one better than the other. Like if they were sick or in an accident or whatever, it doesn't matter to the story of.
Or maybe it does, but I think this is a good opportunity for educators too. Hey,
yes. Hi.
I think it is great, and I consider the AP Style book an educator. We are educating people in the media how to write and talk about things, and your guidance should not be ask people how they want to be described. Right. It should be, here's how to ask people how they want to be described.
Yes, because asking them how they want to be described then puts the burden on the person you are interviewing, rather than on you. It's kind of shifting that responsibility.
And look at the great work we've done with pronouns over the past 5-10 years. It is very easy now to talk to somebody and say, what are your pronouns? Or do you have pronouns that you want me to use? Like I can think of a dozen ways to ask somebody their pronouns. That doesn't make me uncomfortable, because along the way, people have taught me how to do that. Yeah. So to give blanket, just ask them. Well, that's not helpful, you know?
Right. All right. So next paragraph is about obesity is a chronic disease, blah, blah, blah.
Fine. They're all facts.
Sure. All right. Next up, I'm going to read and you react. The phrasing people with obesity or a person with obesity is acceptable when a general term is needed and is relevant, unless a group or person prefers other terms. The term obesity is used most often in health or medical contexts. Researchers hope the treatment helps people with obesity.
Yeah, so that's true, right? And that's okay. I again, personally would bristle at people with obesity or person with obesity, because I would not want to be talked about that way. Mm-hmm. But again, they do say unless a person or a group prefers other terms. And again, now you're going to have to ask them. Mm-hmm. This is a complicated subject. You almost can't tell people what to do in this case. So I don't know that there's a good answer here, but I do know I bristled a lot here. Okay. What I will say about that last part very quickly is, yes, obesity is used as, is most used in a health or a medical context. But there is also a problem with that I don't need to dig into, because it's not a language problem. It is much more of a, it's much more of a stigma in the medical community and with patients, and go listen to Maintenance Phase.
All right. Avoid the modifier obese when possible. Fine. Sure. Blah, blah, blah. Medically classified as obese is acceptable in medical and healthcare contexts. This is helpful. Do not use the term morbidly obese.
Yeah, let's not do that. That's great advice. I love it. Highlight that in your style book and hang on to, do not use the term morbidly obese. I'm also, if you are writing in a medical and healthcare context, you already know these things. Yes. And you already have your own style book, probably. I would be curious how many people who reference the style book need to be reminded that the term medically classified as obese is acceptable in a medical context.
All right, next up. Some people and groups identify as and prefer the term fat, seeking to eliminate the stigma around both the word and the people. Others say that the word has long been seen as a slur and should be avoided. That's some serious both siding there, isn't it, by AP? The terms fat and fatness are acceptable for people or groups that use it for themselves. Oh, that's nice. But make clear that this is the preference of the person or group. A brief explanation may be helpful.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think this is the second time we fell over. Yeah. You don't get to tell the people doing the work what words they get to use for the work they're doing. Yes. You're not doing the work. You're reporting on the work. You're telling people how to report on the work. But the people doing the work are the boots on the ground who are hearing from people and talking to people. And, they are not wrong. But part of learning here is understanding how the people who this affects really do feel and talk about and experience these things. And so, yeah, please don't use fat as a slur. But
Yes.
but you can use it as a word because it's only a slur because you made it one.
Yes.
So take the word back. I don't love that either. But you can take.
Right. Okay. Next up, some people with obesity use terms such as plus sized. Do they?
Yeah, they do.
Okay. People of higher weight, larger bodied, people of size, and others.
Pause.
Yep.
Like I said before, all people are of size. Everybody is a size. You please don't ever call somebody a person of size. That's me. You may meet someone who refers to themselves as a person of size, in which case, by all means. But, okay.
Okay. Again, those terms are acceptable for people or groups that use it for themselves and in later references and general stories about obesity. While some health agencies use the phrasing people with overweight, avoid that awkward term unless essential in a direct quotation. The term people who are overweight is acceptable. Overweight compared to what? I know we're going to get to that.
I know this is going longer than you meant it to. I understand that. But
fine.
The term people who are overweight is acceptable. Who defines what overweight is for my body and for me and for my medical situation?
Well, we just ask you.
It is certainly not a reporter, right? A reporter of any kind in any situation will never, ever be the person to determine what my number is where I am suddenly overweight. And to that end, my doctor probably also is not going to be the person to determine that, which is, again, go listen to Maintenance Phase. Okay, you can move on.
Okay. Next up, avoid writing that implies ableism. Yay, true. The belief that the abilities of people who aren't of higher weight are superior.
Yep, that's true. I'll give them that whole thing.
All right. Don't limit coverage of larger body people to coverage of obesity, as that contributes to stereotypes and discrimination. Seek other angles, including those in retail, arts, and sports, and include the voices and images of people with obesity who are experts in a given area in stories about that topic.
I would like to draw a giant line through that entire paragraph.
Okay.
Please don't give me examples of ways that I can include people in things.
Good point. Yes.
A person's weight has absolutely no bearing on their presence in a story about retail, arts, and sports, or experts in their given areas. If you just picked somebody by their name without seeing their picture, I'm just going to stop there because there's a whole lot I can say about this. Please do not give me examples of how I can be a part of society.
Right. All right. Crack the knuckles. Here we go. The terms overweight and obese are not interchangeable because they have specific medical definitions. Okay, cool. A person with a body mass index.
Okay. We don't need to read the rest of this because nobody needs to be educated about the bullshit BMI.
Okay, go.
It's not a real thing. It's not a real medical thing. They're going to tell you it is. Lots of people are going to be really mad if anybody actually listens to this. I don't care. I didn't do any homework. I just got on here and I was mad. But go start looking up why the BMI is not a real thing and why telling people that they should write about people a certain way based on their BMI is the most insane thing I have ever heard in my life. But I would really love anybody in any position of influence to start researching what the BMI really is and where it really came from and what it really doesn't mean before they start putting it in more and more places where it's going to influence more and more people. This has no place here in any context, in any way. And the very last paragraph says, many experts acknowledge that BMI is a flawed metric because it does not directly measure body fat, but say it remains a useful and convenient guide. For what? I want to know what it is a useful and convenient guide for. And also, the BMI is just a bunch of made-up numbers. So go do your homework on the BMI. And if you're going to discredit the BMI, literally a sentence after you drop 1, 2, 3 sentences of BMI information as fact directly above it, maybe you shouldn't have dropped it as fact directly above it.
Boom.
Okay, that's where I got really angry and grabbed the microphone. And was like,
yeah.
yes, let's talk. Thank you for indulging me and letting me get my aggressions out here instead of just laying on the floor groaning. Which is what I would be doing otherwise.
Jen Moritz, this is great, and you can listen to our regular episode where we get kind of big picture on this stuff. It's out next week. So thanks, buddy.
Thank you. Thank you.